Welcome to the Redemption Podcast with your hosts, Staci
and Julia. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 5 of Redemption. I'm your host, Julia, and today I'm joined by my co-host, Staci.
Hi.
And our guest today, Michelle Parker, the project manager of the My House Greenhouse.
Hi.
And today we're going to be talking with Michelle and learning about different attachment styles as well as healthy and unhealthy relationship habits in order to gain new insights about ourselves and develop healthier relationships,
Yay.
Which I'm very excited.
Yeah, me too.
First, before we get started, Isaac, do we have any housekeeping?
Just that the day that this comes out actually is the same day as the radiothon. So if you're listening to this on Friday, November 3rd, you should, I don't want to say stop listening, but maybe turn on the radio and listen to this during the commercial breaks or something. I don't know, Q99.7. We're from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So if you're in that window, we're on the radio right now, and I'm sure it's going great. The podcast side of things, part 2 of our Season 3 opener My Voice episode comes out this Friday. I don't know if any of you guys listen to that, but it was really good. It was really fun. And
I'm excited to listen.
On a cliffhanger, and now part 2 will be coming out in a week. And My House Podcast has some stuff out. Diag Nonsense just released an episode because Kurt and he was on vacation and I was sick, and we finally just got in there and scheduled it. We talked about Apocalypse Now, which I watched while I was sick. That movie's already a fever dream, and so I was just sitting on the couch sick watching crazy Vietnam War movie, and yeah, that was fun. Good movie. It was awesome.
So, way to go to that place, Isaac.
Yeah, no, I just really embraced the heart of darkness while I was on my couch coughing. So yeah, it was a good time. You can go listen to that after you listen to this.
Awesome.
There you go.
Good.
Cool.
Thank you, Isaac.
You're welcome.
That was me when I had COVID watching Euphoria.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll put you in a weird headspace.
Yeah, no, I don't recommend it. But I do recommend learning about attachment styles. So, Michelle, welcome.
Hi. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so Michelle is the project manager for the greenhouse here, and she's also my best friend.
Aww.
And we've done a lot of growing together, I would say, on this journey that we've been on working for My House. And so what prompted you to start learning about attachment styles and doing research on it?
Well, I just want to disclose that I'm not in any way a professional of healthy relationships or unhealthy relationships or attachment styles. I simply was in a relationship, and it was my first ever healthy relationship, and I was emotionally dumping on him, which led to us having a break. And so I was, super sad, and I came across these TikTok videos of attachment styles, and they were talking about the different attachment styles. So there's 4 different attachment styles. There's secure attachment style, and then there's the 3 insecure attachment styles. Those are avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and disorganized attachment. And it started a whole snowball effect of me figuring out, oh my gosh, I'm an anxious attachment style, I really, when I get into relationships, I'm very worrisome, and I get very clingy, and I don't know, and I anxious also tend to be kind of codependent too, and that's what I was doing, and that's what led to the breakup. And so I got through that whole thing, and I did a lot of self-discovery, and then
you taught me.
Yeah, and then I taught you.
And I started learning about myself.
Yeah.
So just so that everybody understands, these attachment styles have to do with our attachments, like the way that we attach to people in our relationships.
Okay.
So can you give us a bit of an overview of each of the attachment styles, starting maybe with the secure attachment style?
Yeah, so all of these attachment styles are based on how you were raised in your childhood. In your childhood, if you had parents who were secure and loved you, did not judge you,
didn't abandon you,
they didn't force you to do things, they let you be you and completely loved you for it. And so a lot of people who are secure grew up that way. And secure attachments is they're firm in their relationships. They voice whatever they need, whatever they want out of their relationship. They don't breadcrumb. They love you for who you are. And just...
You're not worried that you're going to leave.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's very interesting to identify that. Like, I was just like, oh, like I was not raised in a secure home. So the other three are insecure attachment styles. And so avoidance were raised in a childhood that was kind of more like judgmental and was more...
Where you don't feel like you can... like you feel like you need to run away for whatever reason.
Yeah, and they tend to be people pleasers too. And then when you get into a relationship or friendships, sometimes when it starts feeling real, they don't want to be abandoned, so they leave before they could be abandoned.
That's me.
Yeah, and
right when it gets hot and serious, I dip.
Yeah, and then also like avoidants like to be alone, and so avoidants kind of prefer that lifestyle, you know. And once they start feeling like they're being coddled and people are clinging onto them, they just want to leave, you know. They just want to escape because that's how their parents treated them. They coddled them. They put them in a box, and they don't want to be in that box. And then a preoccupied anxious, which is me, a lot of times in their childhood, they were abandoned. Like their parents weren't really there for them. They didn't really show up for them. They like made promises that they couldn't keep. And then they grow up like me, like I'm growing up being very anxious, being in relationships so scared that they were going to leave me like my parents left me, you know. And in a couple of relationships, I was jealous, and that's one of the things that anxious attachment style people do is they get very jealous in relationships because they don't want them to leave them. And then also anxious attachment styles, they overthink so much, and that is me from the T. Like I am definitely an overthinker, and especially like if during that separation, like I was like, what did I do wrong? What could I do better? How can I fix this? You know, like my mind was going 100 miles an hour, and I was just thinking so much, and I couldn't stop thinking. And then I came across that, and I was like, oh my gosh, that is so me.
Yeah, this makes so much sense. It makes me feel less crazy.
Right.
You know, it's something you can identify with, and you can see it in front of you. It's not just lost in the stratosphere of your brain.
Yeah.
You don't know what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah, exactly.
It all makes sense.
Yeah, it's just, you know, we just need to learn to heal from that. And then the last one is a disorganized attachment style. And that attachment style makes me think of a lot of our clients that come in through our doors. They grow up in homes that are very abusive, very toxic. Like their parents like treat them so poorly. And I didn't realize that the disorganized one was a part of the attachment styles until right before the podcast. I was like, oh my gosh, there's another attachment style that I missed. And so I was researching it, and I was coming across it, and it made me think of this one client of ours is so in a shell. And that's what a lot of times disorganized attachment styles, that they're so coddled and so in a shell, and they don't want to open up.
Interesting.
Because they're so scared that they're going to be attacked like how they were.
So what makes that disorganized? Like how is disorganized defined?
So it says here that disorganized attachment is characterized by inconsistent and hard to predict behavior. And it also kind of makes me think of like how narcissists are, you know, because they're very hard to predict. But it's not only narcissists, but it's also those who were treated that way from narcissists.
Yeah, I learned about, you know, so I'm a naturally very avoidant person. I like to have one foot in, one foot out as like sort of a protective thing. And I look for reasons, you know, if somebody's clingy to me, then I run because I feel smothered. I feel like I can't be free. And that same instinct that I've always had almost ruined a really beautiful relationship that I managed to salvage, thanks to Michelle and teaching me about these different attachment styles and learning and growing from them. So I'm really grateful.
To kind of piggyback off what you just said, Julia, like I almost, I lost that relationship for a little bit, but I came back together with my mans, and because because I started identifying these things and I started working on myself and started healing those attachment styles and like right before we started this podcast, we were talking about like how it's possible that we could have these different attachment styles throughout our lifetime because we go through different seasons in our lives.
Right.
And so
it's not a one size fits all forever.
Yeah.
Right. And you're always evolving and changing too, and growing and learning from different relationships or failed relationships too.
Right. Yeah. So it's very intriguing to me, and I'm all about trying to improve my life, and because, like my life has been chaos for 26 years. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we're learning about these different attachment styles. So what did you do to help yourself not be that way? Like for someone listening might be like, oh, I really identify with being anxious. Like I'm always anxious. I came from a bad lifestyle or, parents, and abusive, and I was always worried about them leaving or I got abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
And
or
then
I was cheated on.
And now I'm too scared to go into a relationship because I'm too anxious that all that's going to happen again. So what are some steps that somebody can walk themselves through to help them be brave enough to, well, for one, maybe go into a relationship again, and two, not be anxious?
That is a really good question. I think it really depends on, who you are and how willing you are to be able to improve yourself. Not necessarily saying that you want to change yourself for that person, but you want to change yourself for yourself.
Right. Yeah, right.
And it's like being an anxious person, like being with my boyfriend now, it's definitely challenging because sometimes I'll be talking to him, we'll have a whole good conversation, but I think being an avoidant, he's an avoidant, by the way, something about them, sometimes in conversations, they flip like a switch and they kind of disassociate and don't want to talk anymore. And sometimes he does that without realizing. And then it gets me to think, like, did I do something wrong? Like, am I being too much? And then I have to stop myself. I'm like, no, this is not me anymore. He's, obviously tired. And like, I can't just assume these things. I can't jump to the conclusions like how I used to, because that's how I got into toxic cycles.
Right. Or maybe having open communication too in the relationship, like starting the relationship with open communication and stating, hey, I'm kind of anxious in relationships. And, if I'm feeling this way, I might say, hey, did I do something? Or, hey, just so I think once you communicate it, then it goes away, like, oh, well, it really wasn't what I thought in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really big thing too. And I've done a lot of communication with my boyfriend, and it's not anything where we're at each other's throats or anything, but we communicate to understand. We don't communicate to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or, to understand.
Yeah, but I love that. Yeah.
Because a lot, I just seen something the other day that like Usher, the artist Usher, he was talking a podcast about communication is key in our relationships. And a lot of times in relationships, people argue because they want to be heard. And then he said something about like, when you're communicating these things and you're actually listening to them and you want them to feel like they're being heard, you repeat back what they're feeling so you can better understand. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is a huge thing to do. But yeah, a lot of self-love too, and being gentle on ourselves is a huge thing too, because we could be so hard on ourselves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So education, right? Like figuring out, learning about yourself, taking a quiz. That's how I learned what my attachment style was when I first. So we'll include some links to some quizzes and other references that we're using for the rest of the podcast.
Is it like a Harry Potter house thing? I'm a Gryffindor, by the way.
A Gryffindor. Oh, literally. That's hilarious.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I had my boyfriend take the quiz last night, and that was super cool because the questions that they ask, is about like, what is your relationship like with your mother and your father and your friends, and do you feel like you can communicate about things that are bothering you with your partner. And it's a very short quiz, but the education is the first part, and then it's the communication part, and then it's a commitment in my mind to doing whatever is that the opposite of whatever your avoidant tendency is or anxious tendency is.
Right.
So and you're talking about healthy communication, which is a healthy habit for a successful, happy, loving relationship. So I would like to move on to the different behaviors that can either destroy a relationship or have a healthy, happy, long-lasting relationship.
Great.
It's like a nice segue.
Yeah.
So, Staci, I'll let you get into...
Okay, I'll start.
Mm-hmm. And this is pulled from the Psycho to Go YouTube channel, which we'll also link in the show notes.
Okay, so
our sources are TikTok and YouTube for today's episode.
Yeah. I actually think it's psyched to go. I think that was a misspell because it's I don't think it's psycho.
Oh, psycho to go. Well, we'll get that correct.
So it's ED instead of O.
You got that, Isaac?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the 10 behaviors that destroy relationship. I'll just read the first 2, and then I'll let you read the next 2.
Okay.
Stonewalling your partner. Actively avoiding painful, uncomfortable conversations.
Avoidant.
Yeah. Being too distracted and not spending quality time, making your partner feel important.
Also avoidant.
Yeah. Being defensive, destructive responses to communications. I think that might be a disorganized one. Criticizing your partner too much can push them away.
Idealizing your partner, projecting your own preferences onto them. Who could they be, not who they are? Ignoring your troubled past. So not healing from your own past, I guess, or bringing in your back. We all have baggage,
Yeah,
right?
we all do.
But then just like bringing in your trust issues and your this and your that.
Misleading your partner, lies, deception, manipulation, break of trust, and creating competition. Learn how to compromise.
This is a really beautiful one that my partner mentioned to me the other night, that that he felt like we were never in competition with each other. Like his win is my win, and my win is a win for him. Yeah. And all we want to do is like support each other and
win.
Yeah, and cheer each other on.
That's beautiful.
And I thought that was beautiful because I've been in relationships before where it was very competitive. And if I did something that was pursuing a goal or achieving something, that the other person was very jealous.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think that's one that a lot of guys struggle with, right? In that relationship is anytime your partner as a woman is like, going after goal-related stuff, I think that a lot of guys struggle with. It's like the whole paying for dinner concept, right? And I think there's a good balance there of trying to, take care of someone while also not trying to control someone. There's a very fine line that needs to be straddled there, right? And that's why I let my wife give me cash from her cash tips that I can use for lunch.
Okay.
That's why.
So is that where you guys compromise?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think the competitive one, we're both very competitive people, and so that's something that we probably worked a lot on in the beginning of our relationship with communication. I mean, that's why the communication is so important, right? Because you got to identify the ones that you struggle with more and then talk through them with each other so that you know where those pitfalls are going to be and you can address them before they come up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, what's the next one?
Shaming and picking on your partner for their mistakes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Is that like belittling?
Yeah, I think so. I think it, like, for example, is like, you didn't do that successfully, so I'm going to do that. That's just an example.
Yeah. Or like that shaming them and picking on them is only putting you on a pedestal, right? You're trying to put yourself on a pedestal like you're better.
Yeah.
And a lot of insecure people seem to do that too.
Yeah. And sometimes with like picking too, like picking on, like they, like you said, like insecure, like they start picking on you on your flaws. And it comes to a point like, you could be joking around on little things here and there, but like there has to be a fine line that.
Right. So you're not being passive aggressive.
Right. Yeah.
Getting a little resentful.
Yeah, right. I'll just read the last two. Expecting too much of your partner. That is a big one.
Because your partner can't be everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like being an anxious, I can't expect him to be there with me all the time. And I can't expect him to just come over and cuddle whenever I want to, The last one is express your needs and don't expect that your partner is going to read your mind for you. I think that one is a huge one, definitely, because in past relationships, like I just assumed that they would know,
Right.
Yeah. Or you think that you're being clear, but you're not being crystal clear.
Yeah.
Like I have to be like crystal clear on what my wants and needs are. Otherwise, my partner can like not register or not get the memo.
Yeah.
Right. And then you get mad because you're like, well, I made that clear. Why is he not catching that?
Yeah.
I think this is another big male and female one, right? Is a lot of times.
Yeah, she's
that
sending messages.
She's sending messages that she thinks are crystal clear, and male and female brains work very, very differently. And sometimes those clear messages are not always received at all by the male in that relationship, right? That's one that I mean, it's a trope, right? It's like a TV trope, but it's true. Like female brains are much better at multitasking and putting stuff into boxes and pulling this from there and this goes over here, and it's all very compartmentalized. And in general, male brains are very one track, like focus on this one thing, get it done, this is what I'm thinking about. Yeah. I mean, that's something I get asked a lot, right, by my wife, like, what are you thinking about? And I was like, I was just thinking about how it's weird that sloths only have 3 toes, right? And she expects me to be thinking about 2 to 3 other things based off of where we're at, what we're doing, what else is going on.
They don't need a pinky.
I don't like, and sometimes like I'm still 3 conversations behind because I'm still working through that, right? And so, yeah. But that goes back to communication again.
Yeah.
Right.
I think another tip on that too, whether male or female, is like if you don't fully understand, you could always ask them, I'm trying to better understand, so can you elaborate? And so I think that's a really good thing, and my partner really does really good on that. So I think that's a really good tip to do when you're trying to mind read, but not mind read, but you ask about it.
Hey everyone, it's Isaac jumping in from the future when I'm editing this podcast to let you know that we're splitting this podcast into 2 parts because we had so much fun talking about the don'ts of the relationships after our discussion about attachment styles. But then we talked for even longer about some of the do's of relationships based off of our conversation. So we're just going to split that into a whole separate episode, and you'll have to come back 2 weeks from when this releases to listen to part 2. So for Staci, Julia, and Michelle, and also I guess for past Isaac, if you or someone you know are a victim of sex trafficking, please call 1-866-733-7878 or text HELP to 233-733. For local services here at my house, you can call 373-HELP. That's 373-HELP. Remember, if you see something, say something. This is Redemption, Loved and Thriving. Until next time.